The camera shutters clicked like gunfire on the granite courthouse steps of Washington, D.C. The crowd surged in volatile waves, chants splitting down ideological fault lines. Protesters shouted with fists raised, their signs bobbing like battle standards, free Briggs, traitor in uniform, honor over obedience, while others jeered and hurled venom, shame on her, death to traitors. At the eye of this storm, Lieutenant Commander Nia Briggs descended from the black armored transport in full dress. Blue sharp-creased trousers, perfectly polished shoes, metals gleaming beneath the wide sunlight like hard-earned truths. No one wanted to hear. She didn't flinch as the jeers rained down. She didn't bow her head when the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. She didn't blink when reporters screamed her name like it was a crime. The federal marshals flanked her. Cameras rolled. Headlines were already being written. Lieutenant Commander Briggs, a reporter bellowed as they ascended the courthouse steps. Did you leak classified data to the press? Are you a whistleblower or a traitor? Nia said nothing. Her silence spoke louder. Die inside. The courtroom was packed to suffocation, uniformed personnel shoulder to shoulder, with political aides, journalists hunched over notepads, and sketch artists etching Nia's regal profile with frantic charcoal strokes. The air was tight with judgment. Nia's chains clinked as she walked. Her spine didn't bend. Her shoulders didn't drop. Every step carried the same sniper precision she was once known for in war zones. Half the world away. All rise. The bailiff boomed. Judge Elaine Thompson entered, black robes whispering across polished floors, her face stony behind wire-rimmed glasses. She took her seat with deliberate composure, but her eyes flickered just briefly to the defendant in orange and navy. You may be seated. The room sank into tense quiet. We are here today for the arraignment of Lieutenant Commander Nia Briggs, the judge began, on charges of breach of national security, unauthorized disclosure of classified information, and pending determination of treason. The murmurs rose again. Words like treason didn't land lightly in this place. Not when attached to the Navy SEAL who, just hours ago, was meant to receive the Medal of Honor. At the defense table, her court-appointed attorney, young, pale, visibly sweating, cleared his throat and rose. Your Honor, my client wishes to. I want to hear from the defendant. Judge Thompson cut in, voice like steel. Nia lifted her head. Her gaze didn't waver. Her voice didn't come. Lieutenant Commander Briggs, the judge repeated, more sharply now. How do you plead? The entire room leaned forward. Nia stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, her eyes fixed on a point just beyond the bench like a sniper watching wind patterns through a scope. Her body was still, her silence louder than a confession. Somewhere in the third row, Jackson Taylor, a fellow SEAL from her old team, exchanged a tight glance with Mike Simmons. She's doing it on purpose, Taylor whispered, holding the line. I don't understand, Simmons muttered. Why wouldn't she speak? Because silence was a tactic, and Nia knew how to wait. In her mind, the courtroom dissolved, replaced by the jagged ridgeline of Afghanistan. Dust thick in the air, heat shimmering off rifle barrels, the muffled hum of drones overhead. Her finger against the trigger, the breath held, the shot delayed, the timing, everything. The same stillness anchored her now. The judge's expression darkened. If you refuse to respond, Lieutenant Commander, I will hold you in contempt. A sharp inhale rippled through the gallery, and then the double doors at the rear of the courtroom banged open with military finality. Every head turned. The room froze. Admiral James von strode in, his presence cutting through the tension like a blade. Broad-shouldered, silver-haired, his chest glittering with decades of commendations. He didn't slow. He didn't hesitate. The mere sight of him turned whispers into stunned silence. The judge blinked in disbelief. Admiral Vaughn, this is a closed session. This proceeding is now paused. Vaughn announced, his voice not raised, but absolutely unquestionable. I request a private conference with the court. Immediately. The prosecutor half rose, his objections caught in his throat. Nia's eyes locked with Vaughn's. No words passed between them, but something changed, something almost imperceptible. Her shoulders eased, her jaw unclenched. The storm of the past 2 years, of silence and betrayal and shame, broke for a split second. She knew she wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time since the cuff snapped shut, she allowed herself a breath, because the Admiral had come, and that meant the truth was no longer buried. The bailiff's voice cracked through the thick silence like a dropped rifle. All rise. This court is in recess. Judge Thompson's gavel struck once hard, almost angry, and the echo of it clattered in every heart that had just stopped beating. The courtroom swelled with a rush of movement, whispers, stunned expressions. Reporters darting toward the exit like sharks catching scent. But Nia Briggs didn't move. She watched Admiral Vaughn, his expression carved from stonemason. His way past rows of officials who parted like scripture before him. His eyes never left hers, and for the first time in 2 years, she felt the weight of her solitude shift. The man who had sent her into the dark was back, and he hadn't come alone. Behind him, men in dark suits formed a barrier along the walls. NSA, ONI, Dia, and others not wearing insignia at all, not whispering, not blinking, ghosts in plain sight. Even the judge seemed rattled. Clear the gallery, she snapped. Now. Nia's hands remained cuffed on the table as the spectators filed out. Protesters screamed from outside, their chants barely muffled by the thick glass. Her teammates Taylor and Simmons were her last glimpse before the doors sealed shut again. Only essential personnel remained. Admiral Vaughn, the judge, the prosecutor, and Nia Briggs, the woman at the center of a conspiracy no one dared name. Yet, the moment the doors locked, the judge leaned forward. "You have 5 minutes, Admiral." Vaughn said nothing at first. Instead, he opened a leather folder marked with a red clearance seal 1 level above top secret. He placed it on the judge's bench like it was a weapon. "I'm invoking Presidential Directive 17-1. Emergency clearance override. Judge Thompson's." Nostrils flared. "That hasn't been enacted since. I know exactly when it was last used." Vaughn cut in, and that was child's play compared to what's about to detonate in this room. Across the room, Prosecutor Mercer looked uneasy. He shifted in his seat like the floor had just changed temperature beneath him. Nia didn't flinch, but her fingers twitched slightly, trained to feel shifts before they were spoken aloud. "This isn't about national security," Vaughn said, turning toward her now. "This is about a black operation run off the books, one the Department of Defense buried under a mountain of disinformation and classified NDA letters. Operation Echo." The judge said slowly. "No," Vaughn replied. "Worse. Ghost protocol." The room seemed to inhale. Vaughn turned to the prosecutor now. "Do you know what they were doing in that compound?" Mercer's jaw tensed. Commander Briggs disobeyed a direct order. "Compromised a mission. They were experimenting on civilians," Vaughn said. "Each word a bullet. Children, women, unarmed prisoners, some not even from Afghanistan. She didn't compromise a mission, she saved lives." He dropped another folder onto the desk. Photos spilled out. Bloated bodies with shaved heads, incisions, data ports drilled into spinal columns. A child barely 5 years old, eyes glazed, IVs in both arms, skin the color of ash. The judge recoiled. Mercer stood, flustered. "These images are unverified. They're authenticated by ONI, CIA, and multiple NATO forensic units." What Nia Briggs uncovered was a bioweapons research site run under the authority of Project Echo and protected by a rogue special unit within the CIA known as Ember. The kicker? Black River Consulting was paid triple to provide security and to silence anyone who got too close. Silence fell. Nia's eyes burned into Vaughn's. "You sent me there," she said quietly. Not a question, a verdict. Vaughn didn't blink. "I suspected something. I needed someone I could trust to confirm it. And then you told me to stand down." Vaughn's voice dropped. "Because the moment your report hit my desk, they locked me out of my own network. I tried to override your order. Within 20 minutes, Black River launched a missile strike on your coordinates. They wanted you dead. And the survivors?" Nia asked, her voice barely audible. "They've been disappearing," Vaughn said, "one by one. Accidents, suicides. Our own medical teams were ordered to lose them in the system." For the first time, Nia looked shaken, not by fear, but by rage so sharp it could cut bone. She leaned forward. "I have the drive." Both men turned toward her. "What?" Vaughn asked. Suddenly still. "I pulled everything from the lab before the evacuation, medical files, security footage, DNA logs, Ember communications, Black River payment chains. I kept it hidden." "Where?" Mercer demanded. Nia smiled coldly. "You'll never find it, but someone already has." At that exact moment, a secure server in a basement 2 miles away pinged to life. On a terminal buried beneath layers of firewalls, a video file began to upload. Eli Chen, a former NSA cryptologist, watched it render frame by frame. Nia Briggs, captured on body cam, carrying a bleeding girl through fire, whispering into her ear, taking a bullet in the shoulder, still standing. Eli whispered, "Holy shit." Back in the courtroom, Vaughn turned toward the judge. "We have the options," he said. "We bury this and become complicit, or we open this chamber to a classified hearing and begin unsealing what the government has spent years hiding." The judge was silent for a long time. Then she looked at Nia, and the weight of 2 years of silence, exile, and betrayal stared back at her, not with anger, but with moral clarity. "I'm calling a closed session of the court," Judge Thompson said finally. "All press and non-cleared personnel are to be removed as the room prepared for lockdown." Mercer whispered into a burner phone hidden in his palm. "They're moving to expose us. Get Kessler. Get Williams, now." In a black SUV across town, Director Kessler ended the call and turned to her team. "Time to initiate fallback protocol. What about Briggs?" Kessler's smile didn't reach her eyes. "She's not walking out of that courtroom." But Nia Briggs wasn't the same woman they had arrested. She wasn't alone, and she was done being silent. Not just a soldier now. She was the fuse, and it had just been lit. The courtroom had been sealed for hours. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with a sterile hum as Judge Thompson presided over what had become the most volatile closed-door session in modern U.S. military history. No press, no public, just raw, classified truth and the dangerously human consequences of hiding it. Lieutenant Commander Nia Briggs sat uncuffed, now her orange jumpsuit stark against the wood-paneled walls, but her posture unbending. Her silence was gone, replaced by a sharp-edged clarity that made everyone else in the room lean back just slightly. As if proximity alone might draw blood, Admiral Vaughn stood beside her, like a war monument come to life. Less a man, more a statement. His reputation, once a shield, now a sword. Judge Thompson turned the unsealed photos over slowly. Each one seemed to slice deeper than the last. Chemical burn victims, children restrained on metal slabs, medical logs marked non-viable subjects. The silence was thick with shame, but it was the footage Nia's body cam that finally shattered the room's composure, projected on the wall in full color. The video began with her whispering orders from a dusty Afghan ridge, wind whipping across her mic. Then came the storm, Black River contractors pouring from helicopters, masked and heavily armed. The gunfight, the prison break, Nia cradling a child whose arm was swollen from repeated injections, her own blood dripping onto the girl's cheek as explosions cracked through the air. She carried the child through fire, Vaughn said quietly. She took a hit and didn't stop. She violated direct orders, Mercer snapped, trying to wrest back control. This was a rogue action. No, Camille Harris interrupted, stepping from the shadows like a closing argument given breath. This was a rescue. Your office classified the mission incorrectly on purpose. I've seen the edit logs. The observation label was applied after the fact to paint her as disobedient. You changed it. Mercer opened his mouth, but Judge Thompson raised a hand, silencing him with a glance. You came here seeking a conviction, the judge said slowly, but what you brought was a reckoning. Before anyone could respond, the courtroom doors burst open again, but this time, it wasn't a savior walking through them. It was a threat for agents in black tactical suits, badges pinned, but names obscured, strode in without invitation. Their leader, a woman with ice in her eyes and a matte-black sidearm on her hip, stepped forward. Director Kessler of the Office of International Security has invoked Directive 1949, she said, addressing the judge without protocol. By executive authorization, this court has been superseded. Lieutenant Commander Briggs is to be remanded to federal custody immediately. The judge stood. This court is not finished. With respect, the woman cut in, you no longer have jurisdiction. This matter is now a national security tribunal, classified, no jury, no appeals. The agents moved toward Nia. Admiral Vaughn stepped in front of her. Stand down. The lead agent smirked. With respect, Admiral, stand aside. Behind her, Camille was already dialing the secure number. Too late. The agent swarmed. Within seconds, Nia was cuffed again, but this time with reinforced magnetic restraints. As they pulled her from the courtroom, Vaughn shouted, "You have no authority." "Oh," the lead agent said over her shoulder. "But we do. We always have. You just weren't cleared to know it." And then she was gone, dragged from the courtroom like a traitor. But Nia didn't resist. She didn't speak. She didn't even blink. Because she knew this wasn't the end. It was the pivot. 6 hours later, somewhere off the grid, beneath an abandoned mountain installation in Maryland, Nia Briggs sat in a room, without time. No clock. No windows. Just four concrete walls and one door that only opened when they decided it would. A single surveillance camera blinked red in the corner like a threat. She didn't look at it. Instead, she paced not out of restlessness, but calculation, testing acoustics, surface resistance, door rotation arcs, just as she had in enemy safe houses. In hostile country, when silence was not survival, but weapon. Then, the door hissed, and Director Kessler walked in. Her heels clicked on the tile like punctuation. Her suit was flawless, her smile practiced, her presence clinical and cold. "Lieutenant Commander," she said, setting a steel folder on the table. "You've become a real problem." Nia didn't reply. Kessler opened the folder, sliding it toward her. Inside were printed frames from the body cam footage, some real, some doctored. Photos of civilians from the compound, some labeled deceased, others simply missing. At the bottom, Vaughn's name circled in red ink. "We have everything we need to bury him to," Kessler said. "You were bait, and you were beautiful in the role." Still, Nia said nothing. Not until Kessler leaned closer. "You think this is about you, about honor, about saving a few test subjects? No, this is about leverage, about global strategy. Project Echo was never just research. It was a simulation." "Simulation?" Nia asked. Finally, Kessler's smile widened. "Pathogen stress testing on civilians in war zones. The data we gathered is being used to build the next generation of gene-coded bioweapons pathogens that target specific DNA sequences, custom viral warfare. Think ethnic erasure with surgical precision." Nia's blood turned to ice. "You're talking genocide." "I'm talking inevitability," Kessler said flatly. She stood, fixing her jacket. "But your part in this is over. Tomorrow, a tribunal will convict you. Vaughn will be retired or erased, and we will go back to doing what's necessary so your country can sleep soundly." She knocked twice on the door. It opened. But before she stepped through, Nia spoke calm and low. "You may own this room, but I own the truth, and it's already out." For a split second, the practiced calm in Kessler's expression cracked. Nia smiled. "You should be more worried about what's already airborne." Kessler's eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" But the door closed. And Nia sat back down, serene now, like a sniper waiting for her target to step into the light. Far above ground, the storm had already begun. Camille Harris had gone dark. Admiral Vaughn had vanished from Pentagon logs, and across a dozen secure servers worldwide, the truth had started to breathe. The world outside had no idea that Lieutenant Commander Nia Briggs had vanished. News cycles burned fast. The story of her courtroom arrest was already being overwritten by wildfires in Arizona. A European banking scandal, an ADC senator found dead in his home under suspicious circumstances. They said it was a heart attack. But Camille Harris knew better. She was running on fumes and resolved no sleep in 30 hours. No safe house more than once. After leaving the courthouse, she'd gone dark, using burner phones and offline maps, weaving through the nation's capital like a hunted ghost. The files Eli had uploaded were their only protection, and their only weapon. At that very moment, in a dim, repurposed fallout shelter beneath a shuttered library, Camille hovered beside Eli Chen's hospital bed. He lay unconscious, his body stitched together by emergency surgery. But his mind, his code, was still moving through encrypted servers like a phantom in the machine. She tapped into his laptop. A single blinking file waited. Omega_root_access. Tar inside. Folders labeled with terrifying simplicity. Project Echo Ghost Protocol Glasshouse Dagger Exfil. Survivors Tribunal Template Teeth. Last one chilled her most. A file detailing the design of prescripted tribunals. No due process, no appeals. Just legal theater designed to silence, erase, and repackage moral crimes as patriotic necessity. Nia's tribunal was scheduled for the following morning. Camille slammed the laptop shut. "They're going to kill her," she said out loud, to no one but the walls. Back underground, beneath the black site known as Facility 6, Nia Briggs sat across from her newest interrogator, an OIS behavioral analyst named Dr. Isaac Farrell. He didn't wear a suit like the others. He wore flannel, sneakers, and glasses that fogged when he got excited. But his voice was soft, trustworthy, like poison in sweet tea. "I'm not your enemy," he said. Nia raised an eyebrow. "Then take off the cuffs." He chuckled gently, like she'd made a joke. Lieutenant Commander, I'm here to understand. To give you a voice. I already had a voice, she replied, until your people tried to kill it. Farrell slid a photograph across the table. A grainy image of Admiral Vaughn in a restricted wing of the Pentagon, timestamped 2 years prior. Did he know about the pathogen trials before your mission? She didn't answer. Farrell leaned forward. We know he authorized at least 3 special ops missions tied to Echo. We have the digital trail. What we need is context. What you need, Nia said coldly, is to stop hiding crimes behind command structures. Farrell sighed. You're loyal. I respect that. But if Vaughn goes down first, you go with him. He's not testifying. You are. That means you become the face of this mess. The world won't see a hero, Nia. They'll see an operator who broke ranks and triggered an international scandal. She stared at the photo dot, and for just a moment, her silence softened not into agreement, but calculation. They'll never believe what you're planning, she said, not if they see what really happened. Farrell tilted his head. And what's that? Nia smiled. I didn't break ranks. I exposed rot. He blinked in that moment. She saw it. Doubt. A man trained to manipulate, now unsure if he was the one being played. Good elsewhere. The wheels of global power began to slip. Admiral Vaughn reemerged from hiding, not in a bunker, but in a war room deep inside a decommissioned Cold War-era listening post outside Quantico. The team around him was smaller now. Just Camille, a recovered Eli still in a wheelchair, and 2 members of Nia's old SEAL team, Taylor and Simmons. They laid out the plan across a dusty table covered in old SATCOM maps and active satellite uplinks. We go public, Vaughn said, but not just with files. We stream it. Camille shook her head. They'll shut down every channel the second we do. Not if we don't use channels, Eli wheezed. We hit mesh nodes, pirate signals, Web3 relays. The truth doesn't need permission. It needs a pulse. Taylor slammed a fist on the table. She's alone in that place. Not for long, Vaughn replied. Camille, do it. She hesitated, then opened her laptop and accessed the emergency channel, once used only for deep state. Command level alerts. Code word. White Star Glass type the activation command. Initiate Eagle Falacross for continents. Old assets began. Stirring retired agents, ex-special forces. Deep cover allies who owed debts to Nia Briggs or Admiral Vaughn. Phones rang in the middle of the night. Sleeper terminals lit up in dusty bunkers. Messages appeared without sound. She's alive. We move at dawn. Inside Facility 6. Director Kessler stood alone in a surveillance chamber. 20 monitors glowed around her, each showing a different threat vector. Vaughn's reappearance. The survivors list leaking. Camille's fingerprints showing up in multiple intel nodes. And in the center of it all, Nia Briggs, meditating. Kessler studied her. You're not a soldier, she whispered. You're an infection. She turned to the agent beside her. Glasshouse protocol. Activate full containment. What about the survivors? The agent asked. They all died tonight. He hesitated. That includes the children. Kessler's eyes were dead, especially the children. Miles away, Farid Nasser, Nia's translator during Glass Dagger, held a child's hand as he helped her board a refugee bus in Prague. He didn't know yet that 5 minutes ago, the kill order had been issued, that across 3 countries, hired Black River operators had already crossed borders with forged papers and rifles built to kill silently, that the war wasn't over. It was just going live. And far below, in the darkest corner of Facility 6, Nia Briggs opened her eyes, not in fear, but focus. She had seen war. She had survived betrayal. She had walked through fire with children in her arms, and now she was ready to burn everything down, because truth was coming, and it wore her name. Rain lashed against the reinforced glass of a transport convoy, slicing through the forests of northern Norway. Inside the armored vehicle, Director Kessler sat alone in the rear cabin, her hands clasped around a steaming cup of black tea. Outside, a wall of armed escorts surrounded the transport. Black River contractors, outfitted not in military fatigues, but in matte gray biocontainment suits. No insignias, no names, no flags. Inside the cargo hold was a box. Not a weapon, a boy. He was 13 now, though no one had celebrated his birthday. He hadn't spoken in 2 years. He was known in files only as KO03, though the name whispered through OIS terminals was darker, the Echo Child. The last time a sample of his blood was exposed to open air, 5 people died within 37 seconds. Their lungs liquefied, their nervous systems misfired, their DNA unraveled like cheap thread. But K-003 survived. He always did, and he was evolving in a secure hangar beneath NATO's disavowed Red Hammer base. Nia Briggs was still in chains, but her mind was miles ahead. The interrogation chamber was the 6th she'd been moved to in 3 days. No one gave her names. No one fed her real food. But someone up the chain kept stopping her from being executed. And now, for the first time, she knew why. Because she'd seen the boy, because he remembered her. She had carried him out of the Afghan research compound, shielding his body with her own while bullets screamed overhead. She hadn't known what he was then, just a child with haunted eyes and blood that smelled wrong. But he had known her, and he hadn't forgotten. Even now, as she was walked to yet another room, her heart beat faster. The doors hissed open, and there he was, older, still, silent, watching her. No guards, no restraints, just Nia and an echo child. His eyes locked on hers. She stepped forward cautiously. "You remember me, don't you?" No reply, but something shimmered across his skin. Not light, not emotion, a biological reaction, as if his cells recognized her voice and responded. She knelt. "I didn't leave you," she said. "They made me." The boy tilted his head and smiled. It was a smile she remembered from a burned-down village in Helmand, where an entire family had been erased by a test gas labeled harmless. It was the smile of someone who had watched death come and stayed. Nia stood up slowly. "What did they do to you?" A whisper echoed not from the boy's lips, but from every speaker in the room. "They made me." Their answer. She backed away, eyes narrowing. "What question?" Another whisper. "How do you win a war without firing a single shot?" Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Camille Harris stood before a shuttered news station whose satellite uplinks had been sliced mid-broadcast. But she had what they didn't expect: the raw, uncensored logs from the facility in Kandahar, the black budget ledger showing Project Echo's pharmaceutical funding ties, and the survivor list names and photos of families exposed to genetic testing under the guise of humanitarian aid. She handed the drive to Admiral Vaughn. He looked at it like a bomb. "This isn't a scandal," Camille whispered. "This is a global mutation event." Vaughn clenched his jaw. "We need to bring in NATO. We need to bring in—" "No," Camille said. "We need to bring in the world." Back beneath Red Hammer, alarms blared. The Echo Child was gone. Surveillance showed nothing. No breach, no extraction, just one frame. Nia Briggs' door open, herself unconscious on the floor, and the boy walking calmly into the dark. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what came after. In Oslo, a hospital collapsed after an unknown airborne event. In Berlin, a UN liaison team seized up mid-conference, bleeding from the eyes. In Moscow, an entire intelligence wing was found frozen in place, literally their bodies flash frozen from the inside out. None of them had been touched. All of them had been tracked. The same name pulsed across a dozen intel boards. K-003, active. Nia woke with a jolt. Something was wrong. The walls were still. She touched her temple. Blood, a neurodisruptor. Tactical. She had been used. They let the boy see her to reawaken whatever imprint she'd left, because they couldn't control him anymore. But she could. She was the last human memory he trusted, and now he was loose. Director Kessler stood in front of a private council, the inner 6 senators, energy moguls, biotech CEOs, a former secretary of defense. Their faces flickered across encrypted holoscreens. "Containment is no longer an option," she said calmly. "We must pivot to execution, and if Briggs intervenes," one voice asked. Kessler narrowed her eyes. "Then we show the world what it looks like when a Navy SEAL becomes the world's greatest bioterrorist." But she's not. She will be. Once we frame her for what comes next. Across the globe, children from the refugee camps in Kandahar, Aleppo, and Kyiv began to fall ill, but only those whose parents had been exposed to Project Echo field trials. Their immune systems failed in strange patterns. Some died, others changed, and behind it all, K-003 walked not with malice, but purpose. He wasn't seeking revenge. He was seeking kin. The human race had made him a weapon, but they forgot what weapons do when they learn to choose their own targets. And the only person who could reach him, who had reached him, was now wanted in 17 countries. Nia Briggs was no longer a prisoner. She was the key to stopping what was coming, or the fuse that would burn it all down. The sky over Geneva was gray, choked with low clouds and radio static. Above the United Nations compound, a security drone buzzed in erratic loops, picking up biometric traces far beyond protocol limits. Delegates from 64 nations had been called to an emergency summit, some voluntarily, most not. At the heart of the summit chamber, Camille Harris stood before a bank of curved monitors, her voice steady as she fed the world truth wrapped in blood. Behind her, Eli Chen sat slumped in a wheelchair, tubes threading into his arm, a keyboard balanced across his knees like a weaponized piano. The virus he built, the antivirus, really was only executable once. After that, it would be burned forever from digital memory. It had to be. On screen, an image of Subject K003 appeared. The boy's eyes glowed faintly blue, like a sky that had never seen peace. Camille turned to the assembly. This is not a child anymore. He is a mirror of every nation's sins, and he is already moving through our borders undetected, uncontained, unstoppable. Where's he now? Asked a trembling voice from the Polish delegation. Camille looked at the time. 35 minutes from Geneva. The room erupted. Security scrambled. Bodyguards whispered into encrypted comms. Panic climbed the walls like flame. But Camille raised a hand. There's one person who can stop him. The screen's flickered dot and Nia Briggs' face appeared. She stood at the edge of a high mountain pass overlooking Lake Geneva, unarmored, her jumpsuit stained with blood, wind pulling her short-cropped hair into motion. I know what he's become, she said, her voice calm, eyes hollow but sharp, because I watched it happen. 37 miles away, on a freight train hurtling through the Alps, Subject K003 sat cross-legged inside a sealed cargo unit. No guards, no restraints. He didn't need them dot around him. Snow melted in perfect rings. His breath left no fog on the glass. The monitors tracking him had failed 6 hours ago. But one signal remained. A voice, Nia's voice, echoing on a private comm link hardwired into his mind. You remember me, she whispered. You trusted me once. I kept you alive. The boy tilted his head, eyes narrowing. His fingers curled one after another, mimicking the trigger grip he'd seen her use long ago. You're not like them, she said, and that terrifies them. In a war room, beneath Langley, Director Kessler watched the transmission with clenched teeth. Her hands were bloodless on the console. She's trying to turn him, one analyst muttered. She's trying to unmake us, Kessler spat. Should we deploy Artemis? A commander asked, referencing the U.S. orbital defense cannon. Kessler shook her head. Not yet. Let the world see her fail first. Let them watch her burn, because that was the plan now. Frame Nia Briggs not as savior, but destroy her, not make her the world's fear, not its hope. Every media feed had already been hijacked by a joint operation between OIS and Black River PR. News anchors across languages were briefed on the Briggs protocol. Any moment now, headlines would erupt. U.S. Navy SEAL defects to bioterrorist network Commander Briggs. Behind your pathogen attacks, unstoppable weapon. The woman who trained Eckley would paint her as his maker, then justify killing her on live television. It would be perfect, except it wouldn't work, because she had already been painted once by fire, by war, by betrayal, and still she stood. At the base of the mountain, the boy arrived. Nia waited alone. Her comm link was open, unencrypted. Satellites focused. Drones circled. The world leaned in. They were going to kill her. They just wanted it to look earned. Snow flurried between them as he stepped forward barefoot, lips cracked, eyes glowing with something beyond human. Nia didn't move. I remember, the boy said it was the first time he had spoken in 3 years. I remember your hands. They didn't hurt. You were a child, she whispered. I'm not anymore. No, she agreed. But you don't have to become the thing they made. They made you, he replied. Silence. I chose, she said. He took a step closer. The ground hissed, his eyes turned to steam. They will kill you, he said. They're watching. I know. He looked up at the sky toward the pinpoint glimmer of the Artemis satellite. I could bring it down, he said softly. You could, she said, or you could end it all another way. She stepped closer. Let them see that you had a choice, that you made it, not them. The child trembled, not from fear, but something deeper. Rage shaping itself into grief. You carried me, he said. She nodded. Carry me again. The moment his hands touched hers, the temperature stabilized, his pulse fell. His eyes flickered, then the glow died. Not in death, in surrender, in choice. And just like that, the weapon disarmed itself, in Langley. Kessler screamed as Artemis failed to fire. We had it locked. Fire, fire. But the satellite controls had been corrupted. Not by Echo, by Eli. The worm code buried in his antivirus had turned Artemis into a mirror. Any weapon it fired would strike its operator first. Later, the headlines were rewritten. Echo Child surrenders peacefully, SEAL Commander prevents Biowar Briggs vindicated. Medal ceremony rescheduled, but the truth didn't fit in the headlines. The truth was this: Nia Briggs stood in the cold wind, holding a boy no one wanted to admit was human. Holding him like a shield, like a warning, like a future she refused to let become a monster. And as the world watched, she did not burn, she shined.